They said he knelt for no one. They said it at the Coldwater Tithes, where the Alphas came with their gold and their breeding contracts, and the court watched from the dais to see which pack would leave with the most. They said it in the council corridors, where the Lord spoke his name only in lowered voices, and the torch flames seemed to lean toward the door when someone mentioned him first. They said it on the day he stood before the assembled packs with a foreign lord's daughter on his arm, and let the silver betrothal cord be wound around his wrist, and every soul in the Thornwall Hall exhaled at once, because the untamable thing had finally been bound. What they did not say, because they did not see it, was what happened to his wolf in the same moment. She was at the back of the hall, behind the tithe-bearer columns, holding a cloth satchel of medicines she had not been given leave to carry past the servant's entry. She was not supposed to be there at all. She would not find out for a very long time what the wolf had seen when it saw her. The wolf knew. The wolf had always known. And a wolf, unlike a king, cannot be made to promise what it will not give. The year was 842 of the Ironmark calendar, in the third week of deep winter, on the eve of the Coldwater Convergence, which the packs had held once every 11 years for as long as the stone hall had stood. The Thornwall Hall was the oldest structure in the Northern Territories. 4 centuries of cold granite, torchlight, and the slow accumulation of pack law carved into its lintels. Snow had been falling since the last moonrise, and the courtyard outside was a uniform white under a fractured, close sky. Inside, the hall smelled of wet wool and pine resin and the particular animal warmth of several hundred wolves in human skin pressed close enough to read each other's heartbeats. Mira had not been invited. She had been sent, which was a different thing, by the keep's head healer on the grounds that the convergence always produced at least one suppression injury from the young wolves who misjudged the silver wire decorations strung between the dais columns. Her job was to be outside the servant's door with a kit of binding cloths and stone root tincture, not inside, not watching, and not anywhere near the dais where the Thornwall Alpha was conducting his betrothal rite to the daughter of the Valdrick line. She had come inside because a child was sitting on the floor behind the second column, pressing a small hand against a silver wire burn on her forearm and making no sound, which was worse than crying. Mira had knelt beside her and gotten the wound dressed before anyone noticed. She had been about to go, had been standing and wrapping the remaining cloth back into the satchel, when the torchlight in the hall shifted, and she looked up, and she saw him. Calder, Alpha King of the Thornwall Territories, Lord of 5 northern packs, widower, sovereign, the man the Lord said knelt for no one. He was standing at the altar step with the Valdrick Lord beside him, and the silver betrothal cord trailing from his left wrist to the wrist of a tall young woman who was smiling at the assembled court with the careful grace of someone who had been taught exactly how to do it. Calder was not smiling. He was looking, with complete stillness, at some middle distance that contained nothing Mira could identify, and his hands were at his sides, and the cord between them was slack. She did not know why she looked at his hands. She did not know why she registered the slackness of that cord the way you register something wrong in a familiar room. She turned back to her satchel. She pulled the strap across her shoulder. She was 2 steps from the servant's door when the cord tightened on the dais, and the hall exhaled and the silver decree was read aloud, and something inside her chest did a thing she would spend the next several months trying to explain to herself as the cold coming through the gap in the door. It was not the cold. Mira was 26 years old. She was a healer's apprentice in service to the Thornwall Keep, had been for 4 years since her family's pack had dissolved its claim on her when she was found to carry no wolf of her own. That was the word they used. Wolfless. It sat in the ledgers beside her name like a deduction from an account, a quantity subtracted, something permanently in the red. She was not unkind, and she was not unskilled. and the head healer Osbert had taken her because Mira's hands were steady and her memory held remedies intact, and she did not flinch when a wolf in late transformation made sounds a person was not meant to hear. She was also invisible in the way that only people classed as broken can be, in a hierarchy built on strength, which meant she moved through the Thornwall Keep without touching any edge of the political world that ran it, and that suited her in the way that cold suits a wound. She left the hall. She went back to her station. She did not think about the slack cord. She did not think about his hands. She thought about the child behind the column and what stone root tincture needed to be mixed fresh for the morning, and whether Osbet had restocked the binding cloth since the last Convergence tournament bruise. She thought about those things very deliberately, the way you think about something else when the right thought is too large to hold. If you have ever watched someone stand in a room while their entire life rearranges itself around them without their knowledge, you understand something about that hall on the eve of the Convergence. Stay close, and you will see how it rearranges Mira's too. The next morning, Calder sent for the healers. Not the healers, in the end. He sent for Mira. The message came through Osbet, who delivered it with the flat affect of someone who had decided not to have feelings about it. The Alpha had a hand injury from the silver cord. Would the wolfless girl bring the stone root preparation? Not the junior healer who was ranked above her. Not Osbet himself. The wolfless girl. Mira went because Osbet told her to, and because there was no version of being told by the Thornwall Alpha to present yourself in which you declined. She went with the satchel across one shoulder and the stone root in a sealed jar, and the particular quality of attention she brought to everything that had edges she could not see clearly. The solar was high in the keep's northeast tower, cold even by winter standards, with two narrow windows that showed a slice of pale sky and the wind moving over the courtyard snow below. There was a fire, but it was small, as though it had been lit only recently and not yet convinced the room. Calder was standing at the window with his back to her, and when she knocked and entered, he did not turn immediately. The hand was the right one. There was a line of silver contact burn along the edge of his palm, shallow but inflamed, the kind of thing that happened when someone handled the ceremonial wire longer than the rite required. It should have been treated the night before. The fact that it had not been suggested it had been ignored, which suggested a great many other things Mira did not examine. She said, "I'll need you to sit, my lord, so I can reach it properly." He turned. The morning light from the window was behind him, and she could not read his face for a moment. When her eyes adjusted, she saw what she had noted in the hall and then sat down. That he was not what the lords described. Not cold. Cold was the wrong word. He was still, the way a very large thing that has stopped moving is still, with all the density of the motion still present inside it. He sat. He gave her his hand. She cleaned the burn. She mixed the stone root with the small amount of water she had brought and worked it into the inflamed tissue, and then wound the binding cloth, and was aware, the entire time, of the quality of his attention. He was not looking at the wound. He was not looking at the window. She did not look up to verify where he was looking. She tied off the binding and released his hand and began to pack the satchel, and he said, "You were in the hall last night." It was not a question. "A child had a wire burn, my lord," she said. "I dressed it and left." A silence. Outside, the wind moved over the courtyard. A door somewhere below in the keep opened and closed. "You are Mira," he said, "Osbet's wolfless girl." "Yes, my lord." Another silence, longer than the first. She was about to reach for the satchel strap when he said, "It held, last night, the cord." She did not know what to say to that. It was not a question either. She looked up then, because the shape of what he had said required her to, and found him watching her with the stillness of something that has already made a decision it has not yet said aloud. She was not his wolf's keeper. She did not understand then what was in that look. She understood that it was not the look of a sovereign addressing a wolfless healer's apprentice about a burn dressing, and she filed that away in the part of her mind she reserved for things she could not explain. "The binding should be changed tomorrow morning," she said. "I'll send Osbet." "You'll come yourself," he said. She went. She came every morning for 11 days, which was the length of the convergence and the length of time the Valdric party and the assembled packs remained at Thornwall. She dressed the burn each morning, and each morning he was there when she arrived, standing or sitting, never absent, never late. He said very little on most of those mornings. He asked on the 4th day where she had trained before Osbet. She told him. He did not comment. On the 7th day, he asked what stone root was made from and why it reduced silver contact inflammation, and she told him that too, and his questions were not the questions of someone making conversation. They were the questions of someone who actually wanted to know. On the 9th day, the Valdric lord brought his daughter to the Solar to present a betrothal gift, and Mira arrived in the middle of it and stood outside the door until it was over, and came in when they had gone and dressed the hand without mentioning it, and he did not mention it either. The burn was mostly healed by then. 3 more days would do it. She told him so. He said, "What happens when it is healed?" She said, "I go back to the healing ward, my lord. You no longer need me." He looked at her for so long that the fire had burned down another inch before he said, "You are wrong about that." She told herself it was the way a lord spoke about valued service. She told herself that for a long time. On the evening of the 10th day, she overheard what she should not have. The keep's back corridor ran beneath the council chamber, and sound descended through the old stone in that particular way that converted private speech to general knowledge for anyone below who stopped moving. She had stopped moving because the satchel strap had caught on a door bracket. Lord Aldrich Valdric was speaking. His voice was not a quiet one. He was telling the council that the Thornwall Alpha was already showing signs of distraction, that the betrothal cord had been allowed to slacken twice at the ceremony where it should have been taught, that there were reports of a wolfless servant girl attending his solar every morning under the fiction of a medical appointment, that if the Thornwall lords could not manage their Alpha's attention in the first fortnight of a betrothal, then perhaps the Valdric line should reconsider its investment entirely. His daughter deserved a mate whose wolf was settled, he said, not one that was running unsettled in the wrong direction. Mira freed the strap from the bracket and walked the rest of the corridor without stopping. She told herself that what she felt was nothing. She told herself that for the time it took to reach the healing ward, which was long enough to almost believe it. That night, Calder's beta came to the healing ward. His name was Wren, and he was a quiet, compact man who communicated in the smallest possible units of language, and always looked as though he knew something he had decided not to say yet. He told Mira that the Alpha King wanted to speak with her. Not tomorrow morning. Now. She went. The solar was dark except for the fire, which was larger than it had been in the mornings. Calder was standing by the window again. He did not have the quality of a man who sat willingly. He said, "You heard." "I heard some of what the Valdric lord said in the council chamber," she said. "I was not listening through the stone on purpose." "I know," he said. He turned from the window. "I want you to understand what has been negotiated. The convergence ends in 2 days. The betrothal holds. The Valdric line brings territory, and a water right the northern packs have needed since the Grey Vault drought. My wolf does not negotiate." She waited. "I am telling you what the council will see," he said. "And I am telling you what the wolf has decided. Those are not the same thing." She felt the thing in her chest again. The thing she had been telling herself was the cold. "My lord," she said carefully, "I am a wolfless healer's apprentice. Whatever your wolf has decided, it is not about me. I am no one. He crossed the room in a way that was neither sudden nor slow, and stopped close enough that she could feel the heat from him and smell the particular combination of iron and cold pine that she had been not noticing for 11 mornings. And he said, "That is the most incorrect thing you have said." She did not sleep that night. She lay in the small room she shared with 2 other keep servants and listened to the wind and thought about the slack in a cord and what it meant that she knew by heart the exact measurement of his voice at rest compared to how it changed when she entered the room. She was still thinking about it when morning came, and with it the 11th day, and with it the thing she had not seen assembling itself. Lord Valdric moved at dawn. His daughter came to the solar before Mira arrived, attended by 2 of her father's men and a council elder named Drast, who had sat on the Thornwall governing body for 30 years and did not like things that interrupted patterns he had approved. They presented a document, a formal severance petition, Wren told her in the corridor, his voice carefully flat. On the grounds of alpha distraction, of unseemly attachment to a non-wolf servant, of conduct unbefitting a betrothal that the Valdric Lord had already announced to 6 other northern packs. The petition named Mira. Her name was in the document. The council had 30 days to consider a betrothal severance. They would not need 30 days, Drast had apparently said. They would need 1, given the testimony the Valdric Lord was prepared to offer. There was also a secondary document. Mira did not find this out until Wren finished the first part and paused in the particular way of a man giving another fact the space it required. The secondary document was a banishment order, already signed by 3 of the 6 council elders who had the authority to countersign it. It cited her as a disruption to the territorial peace. It would take effect at sundown. She had from now until sundown. Wren gave her all of this in the corridor outside the solar in a tone that held no inflection, and watched her receive it with small, careful eyes. She said, "Where is he?" Wren said, "They have him in the council chamber. Presenting the petition requires his presence. They will be there most of the morning." She said, "What does the banishment mean? Practically." Wren said, "You cannot return to Thornwall territory. Any pack that takes you in violates the territorial peace agreement. You cannot cross the water right the Valdric line controls, which is the main channel west." He stopped. "It is not merely banishment from the keep. It is from the region." She stood with that for a moment. "And if I leave before sundown," she said, "the petition is weakened. There is no remaining attachment to cite." Wren said nothing. "And the betrothal holds?" she said. "And he gets the water right? And the northern packs get what they needed from the Greyvault drought?" Wren said in the smallest possible unit of language, "Yes." She asked one more thing. She asked if Osbert kept the suppression compound in the store cupboard next to the northeast heating flue, or the one beside the tincture racks. Wren blinked. He was not a man given to visible surprise. He said, "The northeast flue. Why?" She told him. She had 3 hours before the council finished. She used them. The suppression compound was not a poison. It was a preparation the Thornwall healers used in cases of wolf frenzy, when an alpha or a strong pack member lost the ability to distinguish the wolf's impulse from their own, and the pack was at risk. It suppressed the wolf sense, not the person, just the wolf part. The instinct layer, the ability to scent and sense, and know things a human could not. It was kept in a locked cabinet that Mira had a key to because Osbert had trusted her with the full store from her 2nd year of service. The suppression compound, applied in the right dose and preparation, could also neutralize the binding property of the severance ritual the Valdric Lord was almost certainly planning to invoke as his final move. The severance ritual worked on the wolf bond. If the wolf sense was temporarily suppressed in the target, the severance had nothing to sever. The cord closed on air. She had read this in a 50-year-old healer's manuscript that Osbit kept on the top shelf and probably believed she had not gotten to yet. She prepared it in the healing ward with the door bolted and her hands steady and her mind very clear. She put it in a sealed vial. She put the vial in the satchel. Then she walked to the council chamber. She did not have permission to enter the council chamber. The 2 guards at the door were larger than her. She was a wolfless healer's apprentice with a satchel and a sealed vial and a banishment order with her name on it. She knocked. One of the guards opened the door. She said, "I need to see the Alpha King. It concerns his hand injury. There is a risk of secondary silver sickness if the compound I used yesterday has been disrupted by the morning's proceedings." It was not entirely untrue. Silver sickness was real. The compound she had used could, in specific circumstances, become destabilized. The guard looked at her. He had the broad, unhappy face of someone who was going to have to make a decision. He looked at the satchel. He looked at her. He let her in. Calder was at the long table's head, flanked by council elders, the Valdric Lord and his daughter on the opposite side, Drast at the end with the petition document in front of him. The room went very still when the door opened. Everyone looked at Mira. She registered the quality of the room's attention, and she did not stop walking. She went to Calder and she said, in a voice that was steady and quiet and intended for him alone, "I need your hand, my lord." He put out his hand. His eyes were on her face. She unsealed the vial under the table's edge, tilted it against the binding cloth, and pressed the cloth to the inner side of his wrist, where the pulse ran close to the surface and the skin was still marked faintly from 11 days of treatment. She held it there for the count of 10. She said still quietly, "When Lord Valdric invokes the severance, it will not find what it is looking for." Something moved across his face. Not surprise. Recognition. Of the slow-breaking kind, the kind that has been building for 11 days and has finally found the word for itself. Lord Valdric stood. He said loudly, "What is the wolfless girl doing in this chamber?" Elder Drast said, "This is highly irregular. The petition is already signed. The severance rite will proceed, and then the girl will be escorted to the boundary." Calder said nothing yet. Lord Valdric said, "Alpha King, you agreed to this proceeding. You stood here and heard the terms." Calder stood. The room did something then. There was no other way to describe it. The air in the room changed the way the air changes when a very large thing that has been restrained moves, and the council elders on either side of him drew back a single degree. And Drast looked at the petition document, and then at Calder, and did not say the next thing he had been going to say. Calder said, "Invoke the severance." Lord Valdric blinked. He had not expected that. He turned to the elder beside him, who had the rite prepared, and nodded. The severance rite of the Ironmark Pax was a spoken thing. 7 lines of the old binding tongue repeated 3 times, meant to dissolve the wolf bond signified by the cord and formally return both parties to an unbonded state. It required the cord to be present, which it was, still coiled on the table from the morning's presentation. It required both parties to be in the room, which they were, and it required the wolf sense of the bonded alpha to register the dissolution for the rite to take hold. The elder spoke it. The cord on the table remained still. In a severance that worked, the cord darkened and went slack, the silver threading losing its charge. Everyone in the room knew what that looked like. They had all seen a severance before. The cord on the table remained exactly as it was. The elder spoke it a second time. Nothing. Lord Valdric said, "Something is wrong with the rite." Calder said, "The rite is correct." The elder spoke it a third time, louder, with the complete and precise intonation that could not fail in a properly bonded pair. The cord did not change. There was a silence in the room of a very specific quality. Not confusion, exactly. Understanding working its way through everyone present toward the place where it would land. Mira had not taken her hand from Calder's wrist. She removed it now and began to rewrap the binding cloth, and her hands were very steady. Calder said, "The severance rite requires a bond to dissolve. The cord I accepted at the convergence ceremony is a betrothal cord, not a mate bond. It appears they are not the same thing." He looked at Lord Valdric. "Your rite found nothing because the wolf bond was never yours to sever. It was already given." Lord Valdric said, "That is impossible. You stood at that altar." "I stood at the altar," Calder said. "My wolf was already elsewhere." The council elder Drast said, "Alpha King, if you are claiming a prior bond, it must be witnessed. It must be named. A wolf bond claimed privately in this room does not satisfy the Ironmark Convention." Calder said, "No." He looked at Mira. He said, in the stillness of the council chamber, with every elder and the Valdric lord and his daughter and the guards at the door as his witnesses, "It will be named here." She should have been afraid. She thought about it later, about what fear would have been reasonable in that moment, in that room, with the banishment order still on the table and the Valdric lord's face the color of the snow outside. She was not afraid. Calder turned to the assembled elders and said, "I am invoking the mate bond claim under Article 9 of the Ironmark Convention. The wolf chose before the betrothal cord was wound. The bonded pair is present in this room. The severing rite's failure is the confirmation the convention requires. Drast, you know the text." Drast knew the text. He had been a council elder for 30 years, and he had spent most of them hoping he would never have to read Article 9 aloud, because Article 9 was the provision that had not been used in living memory, and its use now meant that everything Lord Valdric had brought to the convergence, the territory, the water right, the political weight of the Valdric alliance, had just become negotiable in a way it had not been 3 minutes ago. Drast read it. Article 9 of the Ironmark Convention held that a wolf bond, once confirmed by the rite's failure and witnessed by a governing council in full session, superseded any betrothal agreement not yet consummated, dissolved the betrothal cord with immediate effect, and bound the governing council to recognize the named bonded pair as the territory's mated alpha pair within 30 days of the claim's registration. The Valdric lord said, "You cannot be serious." Calder said, "Drast." Drast looked at the document in front of him. He looked at the cord on the table, which had still not changed. He looked at Mira, who was standing beside the Alpha King of the Thornwall territories, with a healer's satchel over one shoulder, and the particular expression of someone who has run a very long calculation and arrived at an answer that will take the rest of her life to verify. Drast said, "Article 9. The claim is received by this council." Lord Valdric stood so fast his chair moved. He said many things quickly in the manner of a man whose plan has just come apart in his hands and who believes volume can reassemble it. He said the girl was wolfless, which Article 9 did not address. He said she was a servant, which Article 9 also did not address. He said Calder was not of sound mind to make a claim of this kind the morning after a betrothal proceeding, and Drast said, mildly, that Article 9 did not require soundness of mind to be assessed by the petitioner, and that perhaps Lord Valdric would like to read the relevant sections. He said, finally, and this was the thing that the room heard most clearly because it was the most naked thing he said, "She is nothing. She carries no wolf. She has no blood claim, no pack, no standing. You would throw away the Valdric alliance for a wolfless girl with a medicine bag." Calder turned to look at Lord Valdric. He said, "She walked into a council chamber to protect what she had no obligation to protect, knowing she would be banished for it. She did it with her hands steady and a compound she made in 3 hours from what she had available, and a book she was not supposed to have read yet." He paused. "Tell me which of the two of us at this table has less standing." Lord Valdric had no answer for that. He gathered his daughter and his retinue, and he left the Thornwall Hall that afternoon, which was earlier than planned, and without the ceremony of a formal departure, which the Pax noted and would be discussing in their own councils for some time. The banishment order was withdrawn. The severance petition was withdrawn by the council on the grounds that there was nothing to sever, the betrothal having dissolved on Article 9 grounds. The cord on the table was removed by a council aide and did not reappear. The 30-day registration period began. It was not a comfortable 30 days. 3 of the 6 council elders submitted formal questions about the Article 9 claims' evidentiary basis, which Drast answered with the precision of a man who had found, in his 30 years of service, that the law was the law, and that his opinion of a particular application of it was not the same as his authority over the law's plain text. 2 northern pack lords sent letters. One of them was pointed. Wren handled the correspondence with his habitual economy of expression. The keep itself was quieter than usual, the way a room goes quiet when something important is being decided in it, and everyone present has understood that speaking too loudly might tip the balance, though the balance had already tipped, and no one in the keep was willing to be the one who said so first. Mira dressed the remainder of the hand burn, which healed cleanly by the 14th day. She checked it each morning in the solar, the light coming in cold and flat from the north window, and she was aware each time of the 30-day count moving forward, which was not a countdown to anything frightening, but which had the quality of a clock all the same. After the 14th day, there was no medical reason for the morning visits. She came anyway. He was there when she came. She did not understand, in those 30 days, that she was being courted, precisely, because the form of it did not resemble anything she had a category for. He did not bring gifts or speak of affection. He asked her questions, the way he had asked about the stone root, with the patient attention of someone assembling something larger from the answers. He asked what she had wanted before the wolfless classification, before Osbet, before the pack that had dissolved its claim on her. She told him. He asked what she would want now, if she could want things without accounting for what was practical. She told him that too, and he listened to all of it without the expression of a man being polite. She asked him, on the 22nd day, whether the wolf had known on the night of the convergence, in the hall, when she had been behind the column with the burned child. He said, "The wolf knew before that." She said, "Before?" He said, "You came to Osbet the first time 4 years ago. I was in the courtyard. You were carrying a box of bone-set tools. You did not look up." She sat with that. He said, "The wolf knew then. I did not know what the wolf knew. It took me 4 years of not knowing." She said quietly, "That is a long time to carry something without knowing what it is." He said, "Yes." She reached out carefully and put her hand over the healed scar on his palm, where the burn had been. Not a medical examination, just her hand on his. He turned his hand over and closed it. On the 30th day, the council chamber was full. All 6 elders present, the full Thornwall governing body, and the pack representatives who had remained after the convergence to witness the registration or contest it. 3 foreign alphas who had heard. Wren stood at Calder's flank with the particular expression of a man who had been quietly certain about this outcome since day 11 and was satisfied to see the math complete. Drast read the Article 9 registration in full. He read the confirmation of the right's failure, the witnessing record from the council session, the absence of any legitimate counterclaim, and the 30-day registration period's legal satisfaction. He read the names. Mira stood at the front of the room and felt the sound of her own name, the real one, the one without the wolfless reduction, move through the chamber and come back to her changed. When he knelt, the room went so quiet she could hear the fire in the braziers. He knelt before the assembled packs and the council and the 3 foreign alphas who had come to watch, on one knee on the stone floor, and he said her name, and he said it in the form the convention required, which was, "Here is the bond the wolf gave before I could give it, and here is the choice I make to match it, before every witness this territory holds. One of the foreign alphas knelt first behind him. Then the pack representatives, one by one, in the way that things happen when they have already decided to happen and are only finding the sequence. Then the council elders, even Drast, who had spent 30 years hoping not to read Article 9, on one knee on the Thornwall stones. Lord Valdric was not in the room. He had declined the registration invitation, which the Pax also noted, and would also be discussing for some time. Mira looked at the room, at the assembly that had filed her as a subtraction, that had watched the convergence from the dais and had not seen her at the column with the burned child. That had read the petition and signed the banishment order and said wolfless like it was a sentence already handed down. She did not say anything to them about what she felt. That was not how vindication worked. In the world she had spent 4 years learning the rules of. It came from the room, not from her mouth, and the room was already saying it. She looked at Calder, kneeling on the stone floor with the weight of the Thornwall territories on his back, and his eyes on her face. She said, "You should stand, my lord." He said, "Not yet." He said, "There is something I should have said before you walked into that chamber." She waited. He said, "I would have found another way to get the water right." She understood what that cost him. She understood what it meant to say it in front of every witness this territory held. She reached down and took his hand, the healed one, the one she had dressed every morning for 11 days, and she felt the pulse of him against her palm. She said, "I know." He stood. Outside, the snow had stopped. The Thornwall courtyard was still and white and enormous, and through the high windows of the chamber the winter sky had gone the pale, particular blue that comes when the clouds have cleared and the cold has settled in to stay. It was the kind of sky that would not change for days. Mira had a room of her own by evening, not a small room shared with 2 other servants, a solar on the east wing, and a standing in the Thornwall ledgers that no one had subtracted from. Osbert came to find her. He stood in the doorway of the new room with the flat effect he had maintained throughout the entire 30 days, and said, carefully, "You read the top-shelf manuscript." She said, "Yes." He said, 3 years ago, I would guess." She said, 4. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man revising an estimate and finding it only increased his already high opinion of a particular person. He said, "The compound preparation was correct." She said, "I know." He turned to go. He stopped in the doorway. He said, "I should have seen it. 4 years ago, in the courtyard." She said, "You were not the one who needed to see it." He nodded, once, the way a man nods when a thing has been said precisely right, and left. On the first morning of the registration year, she stood in the east solar with the early light coming through the window and the courtyard below, white and clean. And she thought about the convergence hall, and the slack in a cord, and the child behind the column who had not cried. She thought about the wolf that had not been hers, that had never been hers, that had apparently been given years before she had the information to understand what was being given. Calder came in without knocking, which was not something anyone else in the Thornwall keep did, and stood behind her at the window and looked at the courtyard. He said, "You are thinking about the cord." She said, "I am thinking about a wolf that knew something before either of us did." He said, "That is generally what wolves do." She said, "Inconvenient." He said, "Yes." She heard what was under it. She heard what he did not say, which was, "Not always." She put her hand on the cold glass of the window, and the courtyard below was still and bright, and she stood in the room where she now lived and thought about how the hierarchy had looked at her and seen a subtraction, and how the wolf had looked at her and seen something else entirely, and how those two facts had spent 4 years in the same building moving toward each other until they arrived at a council chamber and a 30-day count and a man on one knee on the Thornwall stones. She thought she understood now what the wolf had seen. A person, whole and exactly sufficient. Not the reduced entry in the ledger, not the wolfless girl. Something older and truer than the hierarchy's records. Something the animal knew from its marrow that the institution had no instrument to measure. The sun was full on the courtyard snow now. She had rounds to make. Osbet's morning preparation did not complete itself. She took her hand from the glass and picked up the satchel. His hand found hers before she could lift the strap. He did not say anything. He held her hand in the morning light in the east solar of the Thornwall Keep, and outside the window the snow lay in its enormous quiet, and neither of them needed to add to it. That was enough. That was what the wolf had always known it would be.